What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So a while back I did a video on what would happen if Yu-Gi-Oh! Had Magic the Gathering cards, and a lot of you guys really seemed to like that video, but you also made the suggestion of taking a look at Pokemon cards, because while some of the Magic cards we looked at were insanely fucking busted, you guys were just adamant that the Pokemon cards could possibly be even worse. So I got my friends to compile a list for me of some of these cards. I'm going to be looking at these for the first time. I barely know how to play the Pokemon TCG at all, so this is going to be a lot of fun. But before we get into that, I want to give a huge shout out to my newest patrons as always. So big shout outs today to Brad. You are the reason that this channel is growing strong. And if you guys want to help support me in the channel through Patreon, then check out the Patreon link in the description below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Once during your turn, before you attack, you may choose any one card from your deck and put it into your hand? What is this? This is like instant Gold Sark? This is left arm offering without having to banish your hand? And it's on a monster? It's not even like a different type of card? What the hell is this? As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent can't play any item cards from his or her hand. So I'm assuming item cards are kind of like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Equivalent to spell cards in a way. So if there was a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card that basically said, if this card is on the field, your opponent can't activate any spell cards from their hand, yeah, that would be pretty fucking good. Once during your turn, before you attack, I'm starting to notice a pattern here. You may discard a card from your hand, and if you do, draw 2 cards. This is such a cool card, because this is basically trade-in, except it's on a monster, so it's actually a +1, because the monster is gonna stay on the field, and if you can keep it there, that means you get to use this effect every single turn. Really, really cool card. This has to be one of the better cards in the game. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. What the fuck? This is like, what? That's like, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead, set my whole back row, and then I'm just gonna drop this and draw 6 cards. That seems perfectly balanced. How is this legal? Discard a card from your hand. If you do, look at the top 8 cards of your deck and put one of them into your hand. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck. Okay, so this isn't as good as that, I believe it was a Pidgeotto or a Pidgeot, but this is still a really good card because you're using 2 cards essentially because you have to use the Misty's Determination and the card that you discarded for it, but you basically get to add any card from the top 8, which is basically the top 20% of your deck. Actually, it's a little bit higher than that because you start with 5 cards in your hand, and you get to add that card to your hand. So for a -1, this card is good. Battle City. Well, isn't that coincidental? Once during each player's turn, that player may flip a coin. If heads, that player draws a card. This is really neat because, so this looks like it's a field spell because it's called a stadium, so I'm kind of gonna just say it's a field spell. So this kind of reminds me of Chicken Game in a way because each player has the ability to draw a card essentially, except there's a little bit of a random element to it where you essentially have to flip a coin and you have a 50% chance to draw an extra card. And I know random in Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't always the best thing, but I know in Pokemon, random and coin flips are kind of a lot more prevalent, but this is really cool because it's a little bit balanced. This can really screw you over if you just have a series of unfortunate coin flips, but I actually really like this card. Until the end of your opponent's next turn, each Pokemon in play in each player's hand and in each player's discard pile has no abilities. So this is really neat because this is kind of like skill drain, except it not only affects the field, but it also affects the hand as well as the graveyard. So I guess it's almost like a Mono Iwado actually, but what's cool about it is it lasts for 1 full turn. So not only does it last your turn, but it also lasts your opponent's turn, so then when it's your turn again, you're free from this and you're free to do whatever you want. So this is cool because it's kind of the spell version of a Mono Iwado, and it's not in a monster, so you don't have to commit to your normal summon. That's pretty damn good. Search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon, show them to your opponent, and put them into your hand. Well, if we're going to correlate basic Pokemon to Yu-Gi-Oh!, let's just say it's level 4 or lower, so this card is insane. Look at the 4 cards from the bottom of your deck. Choose any 2 cards you find there and put them into your hand. Put the remaining cards back on the bottom in any order. This is really cool because it takes cards from the bottom of the deck. And if you have ways to get cards to the bottom of the deck, oh, I don't know, say something like Saryuja, that would be a really cool card to combo off with. I really like this card. Discard 2 of the other cards from your hand in order to search your deck for any card and put it into your hand. So this is basically left arm offering because you're essentially getting rid of 3 cards to search any one. However, you're discarding them to the discard pile. I don't know how much more relevant that would be in Pokemon, but in Yu-Gi-Oh! You have to banish them so they're not in the graveyard. If they went to the graveyard, you would be getting way more value off of them. So this is basically just a better left arm offering. Before you flip a coin to decide who goes first in a game, you may play this card. Don't flip that coin and you go first. If both players play first ticket, flip the coin as normal. Wow, okay, this is a really cool idea. So essentially, is it worth playing a card in your deck that if it's in your opening hand, you get to go first? In Yu-Gi-Oh!, I don't know, that could potentially be worth it because going first more often than not is usually the preferred way to do things. So having a card that essentially would affect the consistency of your deck but allows you to go first in a game if you happen to open it, which is roughly a 33% chance, that might be worth it. I don't know, but this is a really cool design card. Discard any stadium card, so field spell, in play. If you do, your opponent discards 3 cards from their hand. Oh my god. Imagine in Yu-Gi-Oh! If there was a card that said, destroy a field spell, and if you do, they discard 3 cards. That would just be fucking ridiculous. Search your deck for up to 3 cards and discard them. So this is basically Foolish Burial on crack. Look at it this way. Foolish Burial is limited to 1 for a reason. This would just be utterly absurd. Put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. So again, I think supporter cards are kind of like spell cards. So this is basically like Magician of Faith or Magical Stone Excavation, except it doesn't have the drawback of being complete shit. So Versus Seeker is just take a spell card out of your grave and add it to your hand. Yeah, that would just be banned immediately. Each player shuffles all Pokemon in his or her discard pile into his or her deck. This is really neat because this is kind of like a really cool way to help mess up graveyard-based decks because you get to shuffle all the cards in their graveyard back into their deck. Now, it kind of sucks because they could reuse those cards again later, but if they're a very graveyard-reliant based deck like Lightsworn, Burning Abyss, this is a really cool way to kind of help deal with it and just clear out the graveyard entirely. And plus, these full art cards are just absolutely gorgeous. You can play this card only if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Okay, so if my opponent destroyed one of my monsters during their last turn, I can go ahead and activate this. Search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them into your hand. Okay, wait. So if my opponent kills something, that gives me the right to search any 2 cards I want from my deck and add them to my hand. Yeah, that seems balanced. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one into your hand and discard the other. So this is basically kind of like Upstart Goblin because it replaces itself, but there's an additional card so you get to pick between the 2 and the other goes to the graveyard. So I'm sure there's some graveyard synergy there because having stuff in the grave is obviously sometimes a good thing, and it doesn't look like there's a once per turn clause on this. So this is what Power Crept Upstart Goblin is soon going to look like for Yu-Gi-Oh! You can play this card only if you have more prize cards left than your opponent. So I guess the Yu-Gi-Oh! Equivalent of this would be if you have higher life points than your opponent. Each player shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck, then draw 6 cards. Your opponent draws 3. The issue I have with this, why does the person with higher life points get to draw more cards? I would think it'd be the opposite. Like if you have lower life points, you would get to draw the 6 and your opponent draws the 3. But no, if you have more life than your opponent, you get to draw 6. That's such a dick move. Your opponent reveals his or her hand and shuffles all item cards found there into his or her deck. Then draw a number of cards equal to the number of item cards your opponent shuffled back. Wait. wait. Okay, if item cards are supposed to be like spell cards, imagine if Yu-Gi-Oh had a card that said, look at your opponent's hand, shuffle back all spells in their hand, and then you get to draw cards equal to the number of spell cards you shuffled back. That is just not even fair. Look at your opponent's hand, then choose you or your opponent. That player shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck, then draws up to 5 cards. This is really cool because you get to look at your opponent's hand, then as the player who used this card, you get to decide if you want to shuffle back their good hand or if you want to shuffle back your bad hand and essentially do a mulligan. And 5 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh is what the starting hand is, so maybe it would be like 4 just to kind of give it a little bit of balance. But that's a really interesting idea that you get to choose whether you want to disrupt your opponent, possibly make them draw worse, or if you want to gamble and possibly give yourself a better hand. So it's kind of like a controlled mulligan. Really neat idea. Draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. Yeah, okay, sure, why not? I mean, this is basically that other thing from before, except now you just get to, you know, fucking draw until you have 6 cards, you know? Seems perfectly fair. Once during your turn before you attack, you may draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. How is this fair? If this stays on the board, this is even worse than those other cards because you get to do it again and again and again as long as you keep it on the... No. Your opponent reveals his or her hand. Discard as many cards as you like from your hand, then draw that many cards. Okay, so you're telling me I get to not only look at my opponent's hand, but then I get to discard cards out of my hand and draw the same number of cards. I guess it's a -1 because you have to use this, but a -1 to not only see their hand and then basically fix my own, give me that all fucking day. Put as many cards from your hand as you like on the bottom of your deck in any order. Then draw a card for each card you put on the bottom of your deck. So this is kind of like that other card, except rather than discarding the cards, you're putting them on the bottom of your deck. It kind of works well with that underground card we talked about earlier, but it's kind of a really cool idea, you know, just allowing you to kind of mulligan your hand at the cost of a card to be able to fix it, but it has a different role from that other card because maybe you don't want to discard those cards. Say for instance something like Gem Knight Garnet with Brilliant Fusion. This allows you to put it back into your deck, so then that way your Brilliant Fusion becomes live. I really like that idea. And last but not least, Professor Oak. Discard your hand, then draw 7 cards. I'm done. Done. So guys, that's gonna do it for the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun looking over some of these cards. You guys are right. These cards are maybe possibly more busted than the Magic the Gathering cards. But guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video entertaining, consider backing me on Patreon. Because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.